Goodbye, Dennis. What an amazing life, and what an influence he had. I wanted to say you had, but I can't now, can I? What an influence he's had on so many people, how many lives he's touched all around the world. I first became aware of the name Dennis Wick when I was about 7 or 8 years old, because there were these incredibly glamorous golden mouthpieces. And it was my aspiration to play on one at some point, and I still have it. I still have my first Dennis Wick mouthpiece from probably 1972, something like that, and it was a 6BL, tiny little thing. And I played those mouthpieces for many years. I went on to a 4AL. I've one from the 1960s. But that was first how the name was established in my mind when I was a little kid. And then, of course, like everyone else in my generation, we heard Star Wars. And that changed all of our lives. And all of a sudden, the London Symphony and Dennis Wick came on my radar, and everybody's radar. And I first heard him live in 1979. I'd already heard the Walton 1 recording. If you haven't heard it, Walton Symphony No. 1, RCA Gold Seal, with Andre Previn. It's a monument to great first trombone playing. It's absolutely incredible. And I was smiling when I'm saying these things, because there was an element to his playing that trombone players can really relate to. You know, the real fun bits to play in the trombone. He never held back, let's put it that way. I first heard him live playing the Firebird with the great London Symphony Brass Section, 1979 in Sheffield, conducted by Claudio Abbado, a very young Claudio Abbado, who was just taking over as music director in the LSO. The end of the Firebird, I'll never forget it. What a sound. Dennis had this ability, and like something else like Catacombs from Pictures and Exhibition, hearing it on the radio with Chelly Bidake conducting. And he had this sound that was raw, brutal, aggressive, but yet with this amazing substance of high quality sound that went with it. Most of us, when we really go for it, we're going to get the buzzing, we're going to get the brightness, we're going to get the electricity, but it's another thing to keep the sound with it, because that goes so easily. He had that ability. So exciting. I sounded a bit like him then, wasn't it? So exciting. I met him in the Shell London Symphony Orchestra Music Scholarship 1979, which I won. And in the reception, a trumpet player called Bill Lang, said to Dennis, "I think we've got your successor here." And Dennis said, "I think you might be right there." And I was 15. And so all I wanted to be when I was a kid was Dennis Wick. I wanted to play in the London Symphony. I wanted to have my own mouthpiece company. I wanted to play on his mouthpieces. And so that was all our aspirations. He was the English orchestral trombone player at the time for many of us. Most of us, probably. As a teacher, I don't think it's an overstating of the situation to say that he was the founding father of modern European trombone playing. Dennis was an enthusiast, and he was always looking to be inspired by new fantastic experiences. And he got on a plane and he went to America, and he met Philip Farkas and he met Arnold Jacobs, and he brought that back and formed this incredible English school of teaching, which I hope we've taken and grown when he passed us the baton. But he started it, it's his school. And there's often spoken of the golden generation of those students in the 1960s and 70s with Peter Gain, who also sadly has just passed. Maybe they're playing Walton One together somewhere up there right now. With Peter Gain, Dudley Bright and Eric Crees, and this amazing generation, not only of players but of teachers who Dennis inspired to continue his teaching method. And I think his dedication to teaching is something that he's passed on to us. I think that English trombone players, British trombone players, part of our modus operandi is that we need to pass it on, that we need to be teachers. And that started with him. That's his influence that's passed down. It's not the same in every country. You don't find players in other countries where it's like, I want to play in a great orchestra and be a great teacher and help people. That's a very almost uniquely English thing, that it's so universal, and that quite clearly comes from him. I learnt so much from him as a teacher. In whenever it was, Peter Gain had serious playing issues, and he had a wife and a young family and was struggling to make ends meet, understandably. He couldn't play anymore. And Dennis gave him his teaching. Dennis gave him all of his teaching at the Guildhall School of Music. He handed it over to him. One of the acts of generosity and care for one of his students. Peter, of course, went on to be, a legendary teacher himself. But that's how the situation came about. And as so often is the case, when one walks out, one leaves a vacuum, and that vacuum is filled. So Dennis never really did anything at the Guildhall anymore. And in 2000, when I went to the Vienna Philharmonic, I needed to create a situation where someone would look after the students when I couldn't be there. And I asked Dennis effectively to be my assistant, to fill the gaps in when I wasn't there. I think it's quite clear which round who really was the assistant, and he jumped at it. And I got to see his teaching firsthand. And I'd go away for 3 weeks and all the students would get better. And I'd come back and say, well, what did Dennis do to you? What did he do with you? I mean, how come, no, not much. He told us stories about the old days when he used to pick up the trombone and breathe and really let go. And he just talked to us the whole time. And he wasn't playing then. Dennis wasn't playing anymore at that point. And but he used to tell them stories. He used to create pictures for them. And they all sounded like him. They had his sound. They had his articulation. They had his legato. They had his slide technique. That is a masterpiece in teaching, without picking it up and saying, like this. They sounded like him. There was no YouTube back then. There was no Spotify. These people had never heard him play, really. Incidentally, one of the biggest compliments I ever got, someone has a recording of the first performance of the Gordon Jacob Concerto, and I listened to it. I hadn't heard it, and I put it on the speakers and I listened to it. My wife was in the kitchen and she said, "Is that you when you were younger?" That's bucket list comment for me. I'll never forget that. That made me so happy. But I got to watch his teaching close up, and he was so generous with the information. If I said, "What are you doing with this person? What are you doing with this student?" He always was so, the wisdom was incredible. And he would spend hours, anyone who knew him, you know what I mean by that, talking to you about it. And he was very much built on building up the confidence of the player, while slipping very important pieces of information through. He used a lot of kind of catchphrases, 4 or 5 little word mantras, And anyone who knows my teaching will recognize a lot of these things now. I got that from Dennis, without any question. When I went to the Vienna Philharmonic, I was quite isolated out there from an advice point of view. You know, there wasn't a culture of talking to each other about problems or things we were worried about. So he guided me, he mentored me through 5 or 6 years, the first 5 or 6 years of being in Vienna. Tirelessly, he would spend hours on the phone explaining to me in the minutest detail how everything in the embouchure worked, how you would approach playing quiet entries. You know, it golden. I'm incredibly blessed to have had that influence. And he did often say that he felt as though I was picking up where he left off. That's high praise indeed. I certainly took a lot of what he had to offer and tried to blend it with my own ideas. So his generosity, and this is a funny thing, Dennis was famous for being mean. You know, if 3 people walked to a bar, he'd be the one standing at the back. He was really famous on the one hand for being mean, but on the other hand, he was one of the most generous people I ever met in my life. Generous with his praise, generous with his support, generous with his time, and generous with opening doors for people. So where it counted, Dennis was one of the most generous people, the most positive people, the most supportive people I ever met in my life. I wanted to be him, and I formed myself based on what, I can't say he is, what he was, what he did. Playing in the London Symphony, teaching great students, trying to pass it on. Having my own mouthpieces, having my name on a trombone. You can see the parallels. So he was my guide as a trombonist. He was my mentor. He was my guide as a teacher, as an artist, and as a businessman. I also felt, you see, because everything I'm doing in my life was guided by him. In many ways, I think he lived his life out vicariously through me. It was like I was a continuation of his playing career. Incidentally, and I don't know even whether members of his family know this, he once said to me 20 years ago, so he would have been in his 70s, he said how successful he'd been with the business and financially, but he would give it all up for 1 year back in the London Symphony, playing at his best. And that struck me. That was, like the old saying goes, you're a long time retired, enjoy it while you can. So he guided me in so many ways, and he guided me. I felt like when I was playing in the Vienna Philharmonic, he was on the stage with me. I felt like he was thinking about me. I felt like he was really living life out kind of through me. And he always wanted me to come on board with Dennis Wick. He always wanted it. I was involved very closely with the development of the heavy top mouthpieces. Up to that point, there'd only been one shape until the early 90s. And I'd been doing some experimentation with the outside shapes of mouthpieces at Yamaha. And he was surprised to learn that the outside shape actually made a difference, which it does, a big difference. And the heritage mouthpiece was actually, that was my idea, to design like that so it'd be thinner at the top for the easier of articulation, then a bit more weight at the bottom so you get a bit more depth of sound. I couldn't get on with it. I didn't like it. And I think he always wanted, I know he wanted to bring me on board. But I knew that his place in my life and my relationship with him was too important to risk by going into business with him. And on the one hand, I would have been incredibly proud to have gone on board with Dennis Wick. But on the other hand, I'm glad that I protected my friendship the mentor status and the hero position that he held in my life. A quick addendum at this point. As you know, I try and do these things all in one take, but it occurs to me there's a couple of really important things that I've missed out about Dennis. And that's his philosophy of business and his philosophy of teaching. He always said to me, as far as business was concerned, have an idea and the money will follow. If you go after the money, it isn't going to happen. He was such an enthusiast. What he did with the mouthpieces and the mutes was born out of enthusiasm and fascination to see how good he could make these products. And then the money was a byproduct. And with his teaching, the most sagely piece of advice I think I ever got was, every student that's in front of you, at whatever stage they are in their development, has got something good about them. Your job is to find out what that is, show it to them, work on it, and build out from there. And those have been two things that have really guided me a heck of a lot in my life. There are countless other stories about Dennis. He was incredibly quick-witted, and sometimes it was funny, but what I also noticed from very early on was he was very quick to spot and very quick to call out BS when he saw it. A lot of people have written to me and extended their condolences and saying they know this must be a difficult time for me. It's not. It's not a difficult time for me because Dennis was an old man and he'd lived more than a full life. From my point of view, there was nothing left unsaid between us. And I was aware every minute of every day of the gratitude that I owed him. I don't think that's always been the case with all of the people he's helped, which is unfortunate, but I was grateful that he would take the time to talk to me. And so this day had to come, and we knew that. Maybe it will hit me harder as time passes. But I think many people knew he wasn't there to talk to as he once was. And that had been the situation for quite a while. I think we should be grateful for the life of Dennis Wick. He has brought... I can't imagine where British or world trombone playing would be today without what he contributed. And I think all we can ever do is hope we can aspire to becoming just a little bit as good as he was.